Hey, before we begin the next part of the Jericho story, I want to just remind you again of the meaning behind Micah 6:8. So it's basically telling us that God wants our hearts. He wants us to live a life of justice, being fair, have kindness, which also means showing mercy and giving others a second chance, humility, which is another word for joy, Jesus, others, you, and that means putting others first. So the greatest thing we can give to God is ourselves. An obedient Christian life is a great honor to God. So that's something that we can even think about and try today. It's not just for Bible times. So let's quickly review what happened in this battle, this great battle. So God gave clear instructions to the Israelites as to what to do to defeat Jericho and be able to gain the land that God promised them. And so he told the armed men to go first. Then he had the 7 priests go after them, blowing the horns. Then the other priests were carrying the Ark of the Covenant. And then the rest of the people were to follow and surround the city. And they were supposed to go around the city of Jericho 1 time a day and do this for 6 days. Then on the 7th day, he had different instructions for them. He wanted them to walk around the city not just 1 time, not just 2 times, but 7 times. And while they're on that 7th time, he wanted the priests to blow their horns. And then the 7th time, the army was going to give a loud shout. And as soon as they obeyed every direction that God gave them, that's when the walls fell, literally sunk into the ground. I think that's pretty amazing. And I think about the people in Jericho, what they thought of all this. I'm sure when they saw God's great power, many of them came to know him and want to serve him. But unfortunately, we know what happens at the end. So, what happened to all of the treasures that were taken when they defeated Jericho? If you remember from the last lesson, God gave specific instructions about it. Anybody remember? Let's see if you got it. He said it was supposed to go into God's treasury, not to any of the Israelites. I know that must have been really tempting for them to want to keep some of it because maybe they felt, well, they deserved it or they're all dead now, so what does it matter to them? But it's important to understand that God gave them instructions, and whether they think it's fair or they understand it, they really need to obey that. Again, something else we can learn. Sometimes there's things in life that we don't really get, but if God commands it or our parents want us to do whatever it is, we need to obey that. That was God's command. All right, so I think it's time to get started. So here's our listening question. As I read the next part, think about how did Achan disobey? Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Achan as I'm reading. All right, get ready. So when Joshua and the Israelites defeated Jericho, God told them not to take anything from the city, but to put everything in the treasury of the Lord. Did you hear that word? Everything. One man, you can guess who that was, disobeyed. Achan had taken for himself some of those riches, which caused God to be displeased with not just Achan, but all of Israel. You might think, wow, that's not fair. God is upset with all of Israel because of one man's sin. Does that sound familiar? So, Joshua didn't know of Achan's sin, so he prepared for his next battle. He sent men from Jericho to Ai to spy out the land. They returned and said to Joshua, "Do not send all the soldiers into this battle. Send only about 2,000 or 3,000. Joshua sent about 3,000 men into battle, and they returned in defeat. Now, wait a minute. They just won this great victory because they obeyed God and they are serving him, and they're getting defeated? 36 of his men were killed at Ai. Joshua actually ripped his clothes in such sadness. That's what they did in Bible times. Remember, we talked about that. He prayed to the Lord and asked, why had this happened? The Lord gave him the answer. Israel had sinned. God told Joshua that he would show who the sinner was the very next day. So Joshua woke up early, of course, because he's probably thinking about it all night. Who could that be? Who could that be? And he organized the Israelites by their tribes and families. God chose the tribe of Judah, which Achan was in. Then he chose Achan's family, and he finally chose Achan himself. So Joshua urged Achan to admit what he had done. Achan confessed, I saw some silver and gold, and I wanted it. So I took it, and I hid it in my tent. Joshua sent some men to bring the stolen goods out. Then Joshua took those things along with Achan, his family, and all his possessions, took them out of the camp. Joshua said to him, why have you troubled us? The Lord shall trouble you this day. The Israelites, this is a harsh punishment, but God is just. The Lord punished him by stoning him to death. And not only did he get stoned to death, but his whole entire family. This was God's punishment for his sin. Then they burned all of Achan's possessions. Achan's sin wasn't hidden from God. It affected his relationship with God and his relationship with others. Only when Achan's sin was paid for did the Lord's anger against the Israelites end. Again, he is a just God, and he does what's best for all of us. So I have some questions for you. What was the real cause of the defeat of Ai? You're right, Achan's sin. How did Joshua find the sin that was hidden among the people in Israelites' camp? Yep, God eventually revealed it to him. And question number 3, where did Achan hide the items? Yep, he hid them in his tent. I guess he thought God wouldn't see them if he hid them, but we know God sees everything. So, boys and girls, I want you to learn one important thing from Achan. Your sin affects other people. It's not hidden. God sees it, and eventually your sin is going to find you out. And so when you realize you're having sin, you need to just confess it to God and make it right with him. All right, the next video is going to give you instructions on how to do your paper.